Welcome back. Let's take you live to Sally McManus. She is the boss of the ACTU. She's just said that they are pretty happy with this outcome, but disappointed that the increase will be somewhat delayed.
Of around 3%. That would have actually had a big negative effect on the economy and also, of course, hurt working families considerably. The union movement is happy and proud that we've fought for this increase and that it's going to make a big difference for so many workers. I would say this, there's two big levers in our wages policy that makes a big difference or makes all the difference for pay increases in our country. The first is what we've just had, which is the annual wage review, which affects 25% of the workforce. They now know what increase they are going to get on the 1st of July this year. So anywhere between, for the lowest paid, $40 a week, and for the highest paid under awards, 4.6%. Now, for the rest of the economy and for the rest of the working workforce, they don't know how much they're going to get. The other big driver of wage increases is collective bargaining. Collective bargaining in our country has fallen off a cliff. 12 years ago, it was nearly 30% of the workforce covered by collective agreements. It's plummeted to around 15% now. And it's like the engine room of wages growth is bargaining alongside what happens here with the annual wage review. And when that engine room has conked out, you're in a situation where we've got low wage increases that have been bedded in for a long period of time now. We know from previous annual wage increases, it makes a small impact in the overall wage increases, so around 1%, like a bit less. It makes a bump to what will happen with wages overall, but not enough to lift it to a point where people are able to cope with cost of living increases, or for that matter, like to deal with the decade of neglect that we've had. So I think that this means that there needs to be a concentration on fixing the whole picture so that we return in our country to a situation where working people are fairly sharing in our nation's wealth. Labor's share of our overall wealth of our country, the GDP, has never been at a lower point than it is at the moment, and that's not a position that we want to be in as a country. All of Australians should share in the recovery and share in the growth that they are producing. And at the moment they're not, and the reason why they're not is because our wages system is stuck in the past and it's holding back wages increases. Having said that, that's in the future. That's the things that we've got to fix, and we know that, and we're going to work with the incoming government, the new government, to do that, and obviously have those discussions as well with the employers about fixing collective bargaining. But today, we welcome the fact that that low-paid workers have had this increase, and the fact that the union movement has fought so hard to achieve it.
Do you think this increase will stand the test of time? With inflation set to reach 6% and the RBA said 7%. Do you think they'll be facing another wage crisis at that point?
Look, we were always concerned about what future inflation would be, and this moved around the whole time of this annual wage review. So it was only yesterday that the Reserve Bank Governor said he thinks that inflation will get to around 7% around Christmas, and that's halfway through this pay increase. So we're always mindful of that problem, which is why we were asking for a 5.5% increase, and we thought that that was very reasonable. We don't know what is going to happen into the future in terms of inflation, whether or not it's a spike that will quickly come off, or whether or not it's going to be something that continues longer than a year. If it continues longer than a year, obviously we'll need to make sure that workers do get pay rises that mean they keep their heads above water. We've always been very mindful of not adding to inflation. That's why we've never asked for a pay increase that's more than inflation and more than productivity. That is what both the Reserve Bank Governor and also the Treasury have said is fair in terms of not putting pressure on inflation. So we've got to consider that now, and members of unions will be now looking at what pay increases that they need to achieve to make sure that we at least see through this next 12 months, which I think is going to be a tough 12 months for working people. It already is a tough time for working people to see through the end of it so that people can keep up with the cost of living. But we need to know this. It's not as if businesses are suffering at the moment. They're not. They have actually doing very, very well. Their profits are up 20%. If we had have won the 5.5%, that would have equated to 1% of their profits, a small amount. And that's what working people in our country are asking for, to fairly share in the recovery, to fairly share in all of that. That means employers need to give pay rises. And as we know, pay rises don't just come about because unemployment is low. Unemployment's low at the moment. We're not seeing those pay increases. They don't just come about because productivity's up. Productivity's up at the moment. We're not seeing those increases. They don't just come about because companies can afford them. They can afford them at the moment, but they're just choosing not to give it. This has all got to do actually with workers' bargaining power, and it's about time as a country we faced up to that is our problem, and we need to fix the whole system so that it's rebalanced.
How disappointed, are you really disappointed that it's fallen really short of that 5.5%?
Well, I mean, a decision in the context of employers arguing for very big wage cuts, the fact that they've said 5.2% for the lowest paid and 4.6% at least for everyone else, whilst it's not exactly what we wanted, we welcome this increase because we know that it is actually going to make a big difference to 25% of the workforce. We're talking about millions of people and their families that will have a better chance of being able to afford their groceries, afford their rent, afford their petrol and their energy bills.
That's where we leave Sally McManus. Essentially, she is pretty happy with this outcome today, 5.2% increase to the minimum wage. The disappointing aspect is that this increase won't be passed on to aviation, tourism or hospitality until October of this year.